Okay. If you'll look at your handouts, please go to the one that says commercial listing checklist. And it has the skyline on the bottom. Reggie, can you come up here and here? There you go, sweetie. This one's not all together. Okay. Those of you, commercial listing checklist. If you'll go to the one that has the skyline of the city of Houston at the bottom, it's in the back. If you've got a stack that's all loose, it's in the back. Okay. And it looks like this. Okay. If you'll go to this handout. This, what I'm giving you today, kind of needs to be your Bible, okay, when you're doing a listing. All right. And this will take you through getting the actual commercial listing, prepping for it, and what you're going to need to kind of expect once you have it. Okay. How many of y'all have done a commercial listing so far? Isa, Lillian, Art. Okay. So what we're going to need on here, give me just a second. Let me bring this up so people that I'm recording for can see this. Let's see if this is it. This is it. Yep, wrong one. It's in here somewhere. Bear with me. Be my luck, I forgot to put it on the jump drive. There we go. Okay. I'm recording this as well as giving it live. I had a lot of people ask this morning about Zoom. They wanted a Zoom link. And I understand that there are things that happen that, you know, you can't get here in person, but you know, Zoom started being used. We started using it widely because of COVID, and people couldn't come. People couldn't do the things that they normally would have done. And now it's kind of gotten to the point where it's become a crutch. And people are using it when they really need to get their butts in here and do the training in person. There is no substitute really for being in a live training session as opposed to being in Zoom on a Zoom. Okay. Also have a situation where people are Zooming and they don't have, I can't see their face. So I don't know where they are or what they're doing. And I actually had one agent complain, sent me a personal email, which I appreciated, but sent me a personal email complaining because having to put their face on Zoom wasn't fair because they multitask and they show properties while they're listening. And I went, you just made my point. You just made my point. What you're doing can get you sued if you don't know how to do it correctly. Okay. The very fastest way to lose your license in this business is to practice commercial real estate and not know what you're doing, not dot your I's and cross your T's. Okay. People think realtors have deep pockets and that we are sitting around eating bonbons. Okay. And making all this money. They don't realize that for us, real estate, even residential real estate to a large degree is like herding cats. Okay. And it takes an enormous amount of time and an enormous amount of skill. You folks know I have said this many, many times. The difference between commercial and residential is chess and checkers. Okay. Commercial is chess, residential is checkers. They can both be fun, but one is much more stimulating and requires a lot more strategy. And smarty pants. Okay, I probably should have handed out microphones. Can you hand out some microphones, please? That way, if there are questions, they'll pop up on the recorded version. Okay, if you'll go ahead and we're gonna go through real quick. In your stack of documents that I gave you, you've got a commercial transaction checklist that looks like this. And for those of you who have been with the Market Center for a few years, you may recognize the blue and yellow as being part of what was originally called Duck Club. And if so, you have just aged yourself. So you will note on the checklist that there are a lot of things in red, okay, as well as black. My checklist that I give you, okay, and it's available on the shared drive, my checklist has the stuff on there that will keep you hopefully from getting sued. The compliance checklist in Command is very short. It's got like maybe 3 things, all right? That will not keep you from getting sued. This will go a long way towards that. So if you're part of our group, you need to be at least trying to follow this, okay? Then you're going to have a couple of maps. Okay, you'll have a couple of maps, okay? State of Texas, and then this one shows the Gulf Coast region. I just want to make sure everybody has each of the pages. Make sure you have those. We'll go over those in just a second. You've got a critical dates list. This is probably the second most important document in your stuff, whether you're doing a listing or whether you're dealing with a buyer. Critical dates list. Then you've got the general information and notice to buyers and sellers. This is not just for residential, okay? General information and notice to buyers and sellers. It's the TXR 1506. It's multiple pages. This one I printed front and back. It'll be the only one that's printed front and back because it's long, okay? We'll go over that one. You have one that's the Houston Association of Realtors, PAR 303, okay? You're missing those? Okay, can someone, okay, if, I'm gonna need, which one are you missing, Alejandra? The last 2? You're missing a, okay, there's a general information and notice to sellers right there, buyers and sellers right there. We have a, yes. And the next one. Okay, hold on. The HAR, that one. Yep, that'll work. Okay. Some of these are ancillary forms, but they are ones that you need to be familiar with. I've got another map up here, set of maps. Did you get these maps, Alejandra? You got those? Okay. Okay. Rolling right along. Okay. On the commercial listing checklist, okay, this is information that you're going to need when you're doing your listing, okay? The property identifier, which is the legal description and the physical address, okay? Lot, block, and section is generally considered a legal description for a property. However, if you're doing land, you may wind up having abstract and then a name and then some additional identifying information. When you get into more rural settings, property is not divided up into lot, block, and section. That's indicative of a subdivision, okay? Not necessarily doesn't have to be a subdivision like you live in, okay? But it's a subdivision of land. All right, lot, block, and section. Abstract, you'll generally see an abstract number, A followed by about 4 or 5 numbers. That's a number from the taxing authority, which would be the county. Or you may also see a name associated with it. That would have been the original landholder when the properties out there were divided off into the abstracts. Large ranches, you'll see things like that. You'll have the land broken up into abstracts. Like if it says A000124 King or CW King. That's an abstract name, and that is your legal description, okay? Also, when you're doing a legal description, make sure you follow that by comma and the number of acres. Comma being blah, blah, blah acres. If you are further subdividing a piece of property, let's say you're taking 10 acres out of a surveyed 90-acre tract, then you would say that certain 10-acre subdivision of the original 90 acres. Okay? It breaks it down. Yes, ma'am. Microphone.
Would you have to replat that eventually?
You'd get a survey. There's a difference between a survey and a plat. Okay? You would get it surveyed out. All right? So that was a very good question, but there is a difference between a plat and a survey. All right. A plat is generally a larger, it's multiple, it's going to be multiple pieces that are not necessarily used for the same thing. Okay. If you do a business development and you have a plat, a subdivision, you'll have a plat and it'll show all of the lots that are being sold. A survey, and it'll also show plat in the corner. A survey is going to be of a single thing, okay? It's specific to a single thing. Even if it shows the 90 acres, the survey is going to break out the 10-acre tract, and all of the dimensions on there will be specific to that 10-acre tract, okay? An official survey, an ALTA survey, is going to have the surveyor's name, signature, and their seal on it, okay? Most underwriters at title companies will not accept anything but that. It must have a signature, a date, and a seal. They will not accept a plat. I mean, it's helpful information, but it's not good enough for the underwriter. So they're not going to do title insurance on it. They'll either request a new plat. If you're doing a cash transaction, sometimes they'll go ahead and do a title policy minus, they'll exclude a survey. Only if you're doing cash. Lenders always want a survey. The next thing you're going to have together, this first paragraph, like I said, is dealing with your listing agreement and what you're going to need. You're going to have to be aware of what services you're going to include when you meet with the seller. Okay, your listing sites, signage, what kind of social media exposure, periodicals, email distribution, drone footage, are you going to do that? Now that one, especially if you're going to do drone footage, or if you're going to do, let's say, periodicals, large periodicals, like Texas Land or something like that, which is a magazine. Okay, those are expensive ads. Some sellers want that kind of coverage, and it's up to you whether you're going to pay for it or whether you're going to have the seller pay for it. That's going to be in your listing agreement, okay? And you're going to have to denote that. You're going to have to say, if you want them to sign, to pay for something like that, there is a paragraph in the listing agreement that clarifies that, okay? And my strong recommendation is that you have the seller, you go over it when you're doing the listing agreement, and you have the seller initial that paragraph. Always have the seller initial anything they're going to pay for. Yes. Oh, okay. I thought you were fixing to ask a question. You're going to need information regarding property access. Are there gate codes, door codes? Are there keys required for the property? Gates? Anything like that that could impede access to the property? Because you're going to have that in your listing, okay? It's in that regard, it's the same as when you're doing residential. You have to know how you're going to access the property and make the seller aware that at least in commercial, we don't generally accompany on a commercial listing unless it's a building. And a lot of times the seller is going to want you there if you have another agent that's coming to see a building, a lease space or something like that. But land, not so much. Multifamily, not so much. They're going to come out and they'll do a ground inspection preliminary to a purchase on multifamily. If they want to go into an example unit, then they'll make an appointment with you or they'll see the property manager if there's an on-site property manager, but you don't necessarily have to be there for that.
Another agent is going to be there.
It's a good idea. It's
So
then you're going to need approval to market on outwardly facing or public sites. You'd be amazed at how many people really don't want, especially if they're in a partnership or something like that, or if they're dealing, we have hotels are a great example. They don't want their staff knowing that the hotel is being sold. Okay, and they will say no marketing on outward facing or public sites. So you have to network that one and you have to send information directly to brokers with that stipulation on there that they are not to notify the staff if they want to see the property. They have to make arrangements. Commission. Everybody gets a little bit wonky when they have to talk to the seller about commission. Look at these 2 pages and all the things that you're going to be doing with regard to this listing and understand you are scratching the surface. You're there to provide a service, to protect them, and to guide them through the selling process. When you understand your worth, you will stop discounting your commission rate. Until you get up to maybe 2 to 5 million, you need to try and push for the industry standard, which is 6. If you don't ask, they can't give it to you. And trust me, you will work your buns off to get it. Okay? And most of you who have dealt with listings know that the tiny ones are the ones that are the biggest problem. They're going to give you the most grief.
on commercial property.
You're talking with no mic. So the people that are
There's nobody on.
no, I'm recording it. Here. If you're gonna chime in, you need a mic. Okay,
Now I forgot what I was gonna say, so.
all right. We were talking about
Yeah.
reduction in commissions. Not on. Is it on?
Down to 0.5%.
Keep in mind that it's a write-off for them. Your fee is a write-off. And they're probably gonna need it if it's a big deal. So, I've seen people, and it's getting more and more prevalent now that You know, the other side, I'm dealing with one on JLL right now. And up front, no, you know, they said, well, we're not paying your fee. What do you do? What do you do in that case? We're not, you know, my client's not paying the fee. So how do you answer that? What? No, how do you handle that? I'm not trying to steal your thunder. I apologize. Huh? You're going to have to approach your client. You approach your client and say, they're not paying the fee, by the way. And you better have a good relationship with them. Or they might say, oh,
I'll
well,
just
how are you
deal with
going to
them
get
direct.
paid?
Yeah.
And there are those that will do that. I'm sorry.
Most of the time, if you have a decent relationship with your, we have people out there. If we have people, if you, have a decent relationship with your seller or with your buyer, they may negotiate with you, but they'll pay your fee. They'll pay your half. Okay. One of the things that you want to do with your commercial sellers also is remind them, if they're not accustomed to selling property, that commission gets divided basically 4 ways. Half to each broker, half of that to each agent. If that agent has a sub-agent or anything like that, you're going to wind up having it split even more than that. Everybody's working for a piece of that pie. That 6% is not going into your pocket. Okay. So explain it to them. Generally speaking, when you explain to a seller, this is how it gets broken down. Like, yeah, okay. All right. I understand.
And the other, do you mind if I chime in? Other thing, whenever you're talking to them about commissions, it can be a lot of money, you know, $100,000, $200,000. You don't bring that part out. You just say, it's only 6%. That's standard in the industry. Downplay that sucker. Don't say, well, we charge 6%. Just say, we do like everybody else, 6%. Just downplay it. And they'll, oh, okay. Sometimes.
It's okay.
She told me I had to be here.
Next time I'm typing his mouth shut. Anyway, so once you understand your value and what you bring to the table, you're going to stop discounting your commission. Okay. Like I said, if you get up between 1% and 2%, you may start in residential. It's not uncommon for $1 million property to get discounted. Okay. In commercial, standard property values are around $1 million. Okay. And up. So you're not looking at a $250,000 house. You're looking at $1 million piece of property. You can go to a corner tract up on the northwest side, and it's going to be well over $1 million. A hard corner tract, small piece of land, and you wouldn't think, oh yeah, well it is. And that's an average transaction. Okay. That's why people want to get into commercial, because they think, oh, we're going to make all this money. Well, you make more in a commission, but it may take you a year and a half to close it. That's the way it works. We have one that is now over 5 years old, and we keep thinking it's going to close, and it will eventually, but it is now over 5 years from the date the contract was signed. So don't discount yourself if you don't have to. Information about broker services. I skipped one, but I'll come back to it. Make sure you have that in your package. I don't care whether you're dealing with the broker or the seller. If there's a contract involved, get that sucker signed. If the other agent presents an IABS, you put yours in there too. Okay, and get it signed. Make sure at least your client has it signed and it's in the package. The listing and protection period. In commercial, a listing period is generally 1 year. Because of marketing, it takes time for it to filter out. It's like ripples when you throw a rock into water. That marketing will ripple out. You have to be able to network. It just takes time to saturate the market and get the information out there on commercial. The transactions take longer to close, and you don't want your listing expiring while there's a contract in play. You don't want that to happen. If at all possible, you're going to put in the special provisions portion of your listing agreement that in the event there is a contract in play before the listing expires, this listing will automatically renew until closing. Will automatically renew until closing. Okay? Special provisions of your listing agreement. And what you're going to do is you're going to refer to the paragraph where the listing term is. I think that's like paragraph 3. I think depends on what listing agreement you're using, what classification you're doing, but you'll refer to that paragraph as it refers to paragraph, as it relates to paragraph 3 above. Seller agrees to renew, automatically renew this listing agreement in the event a contract is in play, and it will continue until closing. You can use your own words if you want to. Run it by Hubert. If you're not comfortable, run it by me. Okay, but put that in there. If you extend your listing period, what does that automatically extend in relation, just as a consequence? Absolutely. Who said that? You're so good. He's been listening and he's new. So make sure you have those protection periods in there. Now, the protection period of 180 days, if you don't have a contract that's in play by the time your listing agreement expires, but you've got some interest that's going on, the 180 days protection period will help protect you from unscrupulous sellers and unscrupulous buyers who decide they're going to game the system. They're going to wait out the listing agreement, and then they're going to get out of paying a commission. One of the other things, most people aren't going to wait 180 days to enter into a contract, is what I'm driving at. One of the other things that you can also do, you can protect yourself with verbiage in your buyer's representation agreement. We'll go over those separately. And in your listing agreement, if you happen to bring a buyer to the table for your own listing, understand you cannot do dual agency, but you can do a disclosure of representation if the other side doesn't want an agent or doesn't need an agent. Otherwise, you've got to do an intermediary. But in your listing, you can put in there, if you present a buyer to the seller for the property and they come back, at a later point, that the commission is still in effect. Okay? You're still due the commission because you brought the buyer. Okay? Yes. Right. Disclosure of representation. Yeah. If you're representing a buyer, okay, and you go to a seller who is not represented, an off-market property, and they're not represented by an agent, okay, you can use a disclosure of representation. If you've got a listing and somebody wants to purchase it and they are not represented, but they don't want another agent, they don't want to bring someone in, or they think they can do it themselves because they're experienced, then you want to have them sign a disclosure of representation, which clearly states that you represent the seller in this transaction and they are in this without representation. Absolutely. It's in zip forms. Disclosure of representation. That is the only way that you can handle a contract and technically not have two agents. You've got one agent doing everything. Now, are you still expected to act in an ethical manner? Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you get sued? Absolutely. So you want to dot your i's and cross your t's, cover your backside. Okay. We've gone over the information about broker services, the general notice to buyers and sellers. You have that document. That's the one that's printed front and back. If you'll take a look at that real quick. Residential agents know you have to have this. A lot of the information that is in this document pertains to land, okay, as well as commercial. If you look at the information that's in here, environmental concerns, you've got international borders, school boundaries, abstracts, things like that, tax prorations, all of that covers commercial just like it does residential. And what this does is it defines for your seller these various topics, and they are in your contract. So if they have a question, what is such and such, this is where you're going to direct them. This is a way for you to cover your backside. Okay. I want that on your contracts. The form number is 1506, TXR 1506. It's the one that's printed front and back. It says general information and notice to buyers and sellers. They printed straight. Okay, you may have all, it's 3 or 4 pages. It's 5 pages. Do you have 5 pages printed front? Okay, I'll get them for you. Yeah, sorry. Like I said, our printer's on crack. One of the things that this does discuss, which is applicable to land, especially here in the Gulf Coast, are water level fluctuations, water wells. You've even got a wire fraud notice that's in here. Please make sure you do the wire fraud notice when you do a contract. Okay. I don't care if it's not required in command, which it's not for commercial, which is dumb. I don't understand it. Okay. You also have, you're going to have to talk to your seller about the title company preference. Now, at one time, a few years ago, the state legislature came out and they said, it's really the buyer's right to request the title company. So they told agents, you cannot put in your listing agreement, please open title with blah, 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 because it was the buyer's right to request a title company. Well, guess what? They very quietly did away with that rule. So while it is acceptable for the buyer to request a title company if they have one they want to work through, it is the seller who can generally drive that. One of the ways that you make it easier for your seller to drive that is to go ahead and open title when you take a listing. If you work with most title companies here in Harris County, they will open title for you without having a contract. One of the things that happens when you do that is that they will start the investigation process for that tract of land. If there are problems, clouds on the title, they're going to find it, which is going to shorten the duration for you when you do get a contract. If there are things that need to be resolved prior to actually going under contract, you're going to get noticed. You're going to get a notification of that. And you can deal with it. You can go to your seller and you can say, okay, we have this. We've had crazy stuff. We've had commercial property where the deceased father had children that the other kids didn't know about. And it came out during title. So that all had to be resolved. That really happens. That really happens. Back in the day, they used to call that throwing a wide loop. So that does happen. You want to make sure if you have the option, we have a gentleman right now who has his deed says one thing, that he owns a strip of land in front of his property. And the people that are in front of his property say, no, it doesn't belong to you. So we're opening title now to get that cleared up. Harris County says he owns it, but they say their deed shows an easement. The other people who are in front. How many of you know what landlocking is? Are you familiar with that term, landlock? Say it a little bit louder. That's right, blocked access. You cannot get to your land anyway because you're completely surrounded by other properties. That is not allowed in the state of Texas. You must have an ingress egress easement. You either deed off when you subdivide a piece of land, make sure you've got an ingress egress strip that is part of your land, or you make sure there's an easement for ingress egress that is part of the deed. Okay, and that travels with the land. If someone purchases the front piece, that easement travels with the land. Okay, we've got people right now. I've got one of the residential agents has asked me to help with a piece of property near Alvin, and the property is landlocked. And not only was it landlocked, it is currently a percentage interest ownership, which means the property is it's a 10-acre tract. There are 2 names on the property, each one owning a 50% interest in the whole,
Can
an interest.
let me let you address this one. When a developer is going to develop a piece of property and
Yep.
he's selling lots,
Yep,
and then he goes belly up,
yep.
and every one of those little lots that were sold
Hmm.
are landlocked. And yeah, they have roads and everything planned, but they still can't get to their property. So
If it's platted, what winds up happening, developers, before they start a development, they're going to file a plat with the county. And this can be a little bit dicey because once they file that plat with the county, as far as the county's concerned, bless you, as far as the county's concerned, you have access. If there are roads on the plat that come to the land, you have access because you have the right to go on those platted roads. Now you can have a plat reversed if none of the interior lots have been sold, or if you've been able to acquire the interest in those lots. You can have a property unplatted. It costs you a little bit, but you can go to the county and you can have it unplatted. So an example would be over in the Acres Homes area. There was a subdivision that was going to go in. They platted the roads. They filed everything with the county. There were about, I guess there were about 50 lots. Okay. And a couple of the lots got sold interior, but they couldn't get to them. They couldn't do anything. You've got several actually over there off of Victory. There's a big area where the lots have all been sold, but it's still raw land and it's wooded and they can't get to it. They can't do anything. A lot of them were out of state, or the people who originally purchased them are now deceased because this was done like in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and it never got developed. So what happens is you wind up having someone who wants to go ahead and acquire that. They go in, they buy up all these lots, and then they can have the land unplatted. Okay? So you unplat. Does that answer the question? Okay. So we've got the title preference. If it comes right down to it, when you're dealing with a contract, it's a game of chicken. Okay. Whoever's going to blink. If the seller has already opened title, chances are the buyer is going to go ahead and the agent will say, nah, they've already got title opened. All the work's been done. We're good. They're not going to fight you on it. Okay. Not even investors, generally speaking. They'll just go ahead and roll with it. Okay, documents for your listings. You've got the seller's disclosure, and you notice there's a caveat. If there's a residence on the property, yes, Art. Microphone. Microphone.
Can we go back to off-market listings or,
What about?
all right. If you've got a property that the seller does not want, like the one that I'm working on right now,
Yep.
the seller does not want the existing property owners that are there
Yep.
to know that they're selling the property.
Yep.
So obviously I'm not gonna put this up
Right.
it's gonna be an off-market listing.
Right.
But everyone that I deal with, I'm gonna have, unless I know them personally,
You're going to network it. Yeah.
but don't you suggest that you do an NDA on these?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. That's when you get to the contract process. But yeah, absolutely. I would do an NDA.
When, I mean, and when you first disclose the property, the listing, and then I think before you disclose it, you have to.
I would
have
say
an
when
NDA.
you network it, what you're going to do is you're going to use generalities when you're sending information out. If you use like CIB.net,
Right,
if you use them for distribution, you're going to use generalities and you're going to say the number of acres. You're going to say it's located in Northwest Harris County,
right,
blah, 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 blah. It's got frontage on a major artery. This is the traffic count, blah, 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 but you're not going to name the artery.
right,
Okay. It's going to be general information.
right.
For additional information, please fill in the attached NDA.
Just want,
If you're using Crexi has a tick box on your listing that is for an NDA. And in order to get additional information, the principal or the principal's broker must fill in the NDA or CDA, non-disclosure agreement, NDA, confidential disclosure agreement, CDA, same thing. Same document, different initials. Okay. We have a blank in the shared directory that you can modify for your use. Okay. There's a Word document and a PDF. So if you need, it's a the Word is a PDF, is a template. So when you open it, you're going to have to save it with your own document name. All right. But you can modify those. And you want to make sure when you have an NDA signed that the broker and the buyer, if they have a buyer already interested on Hook, they sign it as well. Okay. The minute you need to tell the brokers, if they represent this property, they have to have an NDA as well signed by the buyer. That also holds true on financials. Income producing property, before you release financials, you have an NDA. Get it signed. Okay, so we're down to a seller's disclosure. If there's a residence on the property, I don't care if it's falling down. If there is a residence on the property, if there's a garage on the property, because there used to be a residence on the property, go ahead and get a seller's disclosure. If the people haven't ever been in it, just have them tick at the top saying they've never been there. Owner has never occupied. Okay, but get it done. There are two forms on the new seller's disclosure. There are two exhibits, let's put it that way, that I have added to ours, which is in the shared directory. A couple of years ago, Texas TCEQ and TREC decided, we've got subsidence issues throughout the state. We have groundwater issues. There are areas where we need to make sure that the buyers know that they're in a groundwater conservation or a subsidence district. Okay, because it can affect your ability to pump water. If you're selling land, if you're selling a house that has a well and a septic, okay, you have to know that you're in a water conservation or that you're in a subsidence district and both. The two maps that you have, these are exhibits that you can use in conjunction with the seller's disclosure. Like I want to say page 5 of the disclosure has a paragraph in it that deals with subsidence and groundwater. Okay. explain these, do yourself a favor. I'm going to try and get someone from TCEQ to come and visit with us and talk to us about this stuff. But a little bit of homework goes a long way. If you can explain groundwater conservation and subsidence districts to your sellers and to your buyers, it will help them immensely. One of the reasons that we have increased flooding here in the greater Houston area is subsidence. We have a lot of subsidence. Water's been pumped out. Those of you who live in outlying areas like we do, a few years ago, one of the water districts that handles maybe Harris County Water District, they basically glommed on to all of the muds. Water that gets pumped, most of your muds have independent water wells. You know, okay? They're the big water wells. You'll see the big tanks, the balloons sticking up in the air, kind of like things. So they're only allowed to pump underground water at certain times. And those times, that's only if the city of Houston cannot pump enough water from Lake Houston to service all the areas. And you'll be able to tell the difference between the water, because the water that comes out of Lake Houston has a lot more chemicals in it. It has a slightly yellow tint, a slight yellow tint, whereas well water will be crystalline. It'll be beautiful. Okay. But that's an issue with subsidence and a result of the groundwater conservation. Okay. It's just a reality. So explain this, teach yourself about these things. A simple Google of these things will go a long way. Okay. If you have additional questions from what I've given you. So if you do a seller's disclosure, or if you just sell property, make sure you have this and explain it to them. Okay. Especially your listing agreement. Make sure your seller is aware of this. Okay, just attach it and have an initial. Yes. TCEQ. And I think in the commercial link document that I sent y'all, I think there are already links there for TCEQ for these things. In the general information document, general information and notice to buyer and sellers, there's information with regard to that as well. Okay. Property condition statement. Do you always need a property condition statement? No, absolutely not. If you're dealing with a piece of property that has had any kind of chemicals on it, dry cleaners, gas stations, auto repair, things like that, extermination companies, they use chemicals, all right? Chances are you're going to be asked for one, so go ahead and get it. When you take the listing, have your seller fill out a property condition statement, all right? It will save you time, and it's just a professional thing to do. If the property you're listing, and also if you have questions about that, your seller isn't sure, maybe they haven't owned it very long, maybe they invested in it and they're trying to turn it, look at what the previous use was for the property, okay? Rural land, do you need, are you going to possibly have a phase 1 on rural land? Why would you maybe have a phase 1 on rural land? We've gone over this. What kind of historical use? But why would you have an EP? Why would you want to? No. The reason you would want a phase 1 or a phase 2 on rural land, especially farm and ranch, pesticide use. Pesticide use. Ranchers especially, row cropping, they use pesticides. where they store those pesticides, if they got dumped, if they had a partially empty barrel, or if they have what's called a cattle rub and they put that stuff in barrels. A lot of times that stuff gets dumped into the dirt and that will pop a phase one. Lenders will ask for phase ones, even on farm and ranch. Okay. So a property condition statement will help with that. It'll identify, yes, they used chemicals. How many of y'all ever try to get a copy of an existing deed when you take a listing? You all should try to get a copy of the existing deed. If your seller doesn't have one, where are you going to find it? Maybe the title company that closed might have it. County clerk's office. County clerk's office. It's a little bit of time. It doesn't cost you a dime in most cases. County clerk's office. You're going to look up, you're going to know who the grantee is. I think that must be mine ringing. You're going to know who the grantee is. That's going to be the current owner. Okay. And you'll have other identifying information for the property that you're wanting to list. Go to the county clerk's office, put in the information you have. Absolutely. Every county has a county clerk's office, public records. Absolutely. 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 Easy, easy, easy. When you get a title commitment, I'm going to step over onto the other side. When you have a contract, you're going to title, well, or if you open title early, you get a title commitment, you're always going to have exclusions, exceptions to the commitment. Most good title companies are going to put a hyperlinked page with all the documents that they're referring to. Okay. Easements, deeds, some of them will go back to the 1800s if they actually have access to them. Okay. Sound ordinances. City of Houston is big on having airport notices and things like that that are recorded. Deed restrictions, old deed restrictions. They're going to show up in those hyperlinked pages. Okay. That's an easy way to get your deeds, to get your old deeds. Now, if they don't have a copy of the most current one, go to the county clerk's office online and get it. What are you going to find in those old documents? Any idea? You're going to find easements. You're going to find restrictions. We just talked about this. We had one of our agents that was trying to work a contract for the purchase of what I call an end cap in a subdivision fronted on Telge Road. Okay. Commercial. Appeared to be commercial. By going through, but nobody had deed restrictions. By going through the deeds, we discovered that the land was clearly restricted from commercial use. He found that out about 3 days before the feasibility period was up. So you want to avail yourself of the county clerk's office. And if you can get a copy of the deed, it's going to answer questions, especially if you're dealing with an investor who is flipping property. 9 times out of 10, they don't read the stinking deeds. Okay. They don't know the historical information that's back there. We had an issue when Harvey blew through. Anybody remember all the homeowners that got flooded when they opened the gates, the locks on the reservoir? Guess what? It was in their deeds. It was in their deeds. The developers built homes in areas that could possibly flood if the reservoirs got full. The Army Corps of Engineers had the right to open those gates to prevent flooding upstream. They got flooded. Oops. But they sued. They had good attorneys and some of them won. Read your deeds. The other thing about it is make sure it is up to you. That is why you get paid the bucks. You want to make sure that your sellers, that your clients, whether they are sellers or buyers, are aware of all the ins and outs of an area that they're looking for. Okay. Okay. My phone is blowing up. Sorry. And I even have it off. Okay. So we've got the deed, existing surveys and T47 affidavits. Y'all know what a T47 affidavit is? Everybody know what a T-47? I want to see heads. Yes, you do. Okay. Who doesn't know what a T-47 affidavit is? Okay. A T-47 affidavit is where the seller warrants, it's an affidavit that they sign in front of a notary, where they warrant that there have been no changes to the existing survey that they have. If they have a survey that they're presenting, they match it up, the title company wants this T-47 affidavit with it, then they'll underwrite it. Okay, lenders want to see that too. If you do anything to a piece of property, once it's been surveyed, if you put, let's say you decide you're going to pour concrete to extend your patio, guess what? That survey is no longer valid because the original survey doesn't show it. Any changes to the land, okay, that's considered permanent in nature, even fences, okay? If a fence has been moved, if it's drilled into the ground, it's considered affixed to the property, okay? We have agent right now, purchased a piece of land. There was an encroachment. They had to move the fence to get the encroachment resolved. They had to do a new survey because the fence had been moved, okay? So anytime there's any change, you must have a new survey, must. If the seller is the one that has willingly marketed the property to be sold, it is the seller's responsibility to provide a survey. They are warranting what they're selling, okay? Like going to the store and buying something off the shelf. The merchant is warranting what they're selling, okay? You look at it and it says, these are the ingredients.
But they don't always pay for this survey.
Well, they don't always, but the instances where a seller won't pay for the survey is if, generally speaking, if you ask them to subdivide. If they have a 20-acre tract in a development, let's say there's a 20-acre tract, Audubon, big development going on north of Magnolia. They've got some 20, 30, and 40-acre tracts for sale. If you have a developer come in and they say, well, you know, I really want this and I'll pay a premium, and they make it really attractive, but I only want 5 acres, who's going to pay for the survey? The buyer. Because it's not what the seller is selling. The seller is selling 20 acres. The buyer is asking for the carve out, okay? If it's unlisted property, if you go to a seller, you're representing a buyer, and you say, you know, I've got somebody that's interested, would you be open to a discussion on this? And it results in a contract, who's going to pay for the survey if it requires a new survey? The buyer. The buyer. Okay? So be aware of that. When you're doing buildings, these are all things you need with you, and this is a long list, and I know it's like watching paint dry. Please read this, okay? For buildings, you're going to need floor plans. You're going to want renderings if it's still in process of being built. For development, you're going to want renderings, plats, development agreements with the taxing municipalities. Why would you want to develop an agreement? Anybody have a guess? Taxes. Taxes. If there are abatements, if there are things that are being granted to the developers or that will travel down to other property owners, if a developer goes in, let's say XYZ development goes in and they buy 150 acres and they have a development agreement with the city of Pattison, okay, for the development of this property, where they're going to get certain tax incentives, all right? Then you have a builder that comes in and XYZ development sells them 10 acres to be platted out for lots. That development agreement, if you're representing the builders, you want a copy of the development agreement because it affects you, okay? It affects you. If you're representing a buyer, they buy land, lots of land, under, what is it? Sunny skies above? Old Texas song, sorry. If they buy acreage they're intending to develop and it's anywhere within the city limits of a town, you're going to need a development agreement. You can't just buy it and expect to do whatever you want to with it. you need a development agreement, just as an FYI. Land, if you're selling land and it's got an agricultural exemption, you're gonna need that ag tax exemption documentation to show that it's valid. We have a 90-acre tract right now south of Alvin. It had its ag exemption when the guy bought it. He took the cattle off of it. Guess what? There's no ag exemption on it right now. Some counties will allow a buyer to establish an exemption in the following year. Following full year, after it's purchased, if they bought it now, they'd be able to get an ag exemption in 23. Okay, if they fill in all the paperwork. But for the balance of 22, they're going to pay standard taxes. All right. Who doesn't know what a rollback tax is? Everybody knows what a rollback tax is. Yes. Yep. You'll pay the prorated amount, but it'll be standard tax. It won't be agricultural exemption. No. Well, it's different. Okay. It's different. It's associated, but different. If someone buys a piece of land and its agricultural exemption has fallen away, or it wasn't being used for an agricultural exemption, okay? If they don't close on January 1st, they're going to pay their portion, okay, of the regular tax, and then most counties will allow the ag tax to kick in. They won't force you to wait 3 to 5 years like they used to. They did. You had to wait 3 to 5 years to get an ag exemption, which was awful if you let it fall away. Now, rollback taxes, that's a different story. In the state of Texas, if a property is under agricultural tax exemption and that property is purchased and the land use changes from agricultural to anything else, it is subject to rollback taxes. About 2 years, the state of Texas changed the laws so that the cities and counties couldn't go back 7 years. Now they can only go back 3. All of your contracts have been rewritten to show that the buyer will bear the burden. If the buyer changes the use, the buyer bears the burden. Used to, they'd try and get the sellers to pay it. And that can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay? If they change the use and it goes to commercial, or it's going to go for development, okay? It can either be residential. Nobody that's got over 5 acres needs to be taxed on land without having some sort of agricultural exemption. In the state of Texas, the minimum number of acres to get an agricultural exemption is 5. 5 acres, but there's only one exemption you can get on 5 acres and up, 5 to 20, and that's bees. Seriously, that's bees. You put beehives on that property, the county will tell you how many hives you have to have, up to 20 acres, maximum of 20 acres.
I thought they could have 11 acres and do other.
5 to 20.
I know, but I mean 11 acres, 10 acres, they could get the ag exemption and then just keep your house.
The minimum, yeah, you can do that, but 5 acres is the minimum total acreage for an exemption, an agricultural exemption, but you must be doing bees. Okay.
One of the things that she was saying earlier is you can get sued. And if you don't know, I mean, it was 132 acres that I was trying to sell out in Magnolia. And the buyer put in there that the seller was to cover the rollback taxes. And at the time we were kind of new and we thought, what is that? And the problem is they wanted her to cover it and we didn't really, we had to read up on it and figure out, okay, well, how's this work? And back then it was about 7 years.
7 years. It could go back 7 years.
And she was selling this property for almost $5 million, but they wanted her to cover the rollback taxes, which would have brought that property down considerably out of her pocket
The rollback
and probably
taxes,
us sued.
the rollback taxes on that property, we knew about rollback taxes, okay? We just had to figure out how much it was gonna be. But on 137 acres in Montgomery County, close to Magnolia, going for about 37.5 an acre at the time, which was a premium for development. They wanted her to pay the rollback taxes. The rollback taxes alone would have run about $417,000. And that would have been due, basically at closing, it would have been taken out of her money. So of course, being good realtors, did we allow our seller to pay the rollback taxes? Nope, we did
And they
not.
argued it.
Yeah, we kicked it back, yes. No, it changed when the purchase was made on this one. It went from a timber exemption because they were going to start development immediately. It went from a timber exemption that she had to commercial use.
But correct me if I'm wrong, and she will. If a buyer decides that they want to buy it and they will handle the rollback, a lot of your developers, they want to start immediately. But if they hold it for 3 to 5 years,
3
they
years.
can get around the rollback taxes.
For every year that a buyer holds the property, and that was one of the things that on one of your transactions we had talked about. For every year that the buyer holds the property, okay, up to 3, 1 year is taken off. Okay, with regard to rollback taxes. Yes. They don't care. They don't care. And therein lies the reason that the contracts now state the buyer will pay rollback taxes. All contracts now have that in the paragraph dealing with rollback taxes.
But they
It's the
can,
buyer.
but the buyer can still change that.
They
and
can try.
request that the seller handle the rollback taxes. And if
They
you
can
as a,
try.
and if you're green and you're not watching the contract and the seller, they're kind of, okay, yeah, good. They don't know. Well, that's whenever you start getting sued, because it's your job to make them aware. And there would not be a worse telephone call than somebody calling you and saying, oh,
A year
why am
later.
I getting charged rollback taxes on this? I didn't even know what those were. You were supposed to tell me. And then you start stuttering and going, oh crap.
Oops, yeah. So
And
you
start
want to be aware,
calling
if you're
Hubert.
selling land, you want to be aware that if it's rural land and it's being sold for a commercial development, for a subdivision to be put in, whatever, if it's anything other than agricultural use, they will be assessed rollback taxes. Now, 2 years ago, let's say in 2019. So it's been 3 years. 3 years ago, the state legislature said, okay, well, counties were, getting a little crazy, going back 7 years and assessing, taxes plus interest, the difference plus interest on these rollbacks. So they limited it to 3 years. The most a county can do is 3 years. Okay, 3. And it can get expensive. So you need to be aware, if you're changing the use of land, it only applies to agricultural exemptions. Okay. It's an agricultural exemption, but only up to 20 acres. Only up to 20 acres. So if you've got somebody who's going to invest in land, okay, let's say they find this really good piece of land down near Manville, and they think, if I hold this land for 5 years, man, this area down here is going to be busting. They're going to have the town center open. It's going to be great, and property value is going to be through the roof. What are you going to tell them to do? Buy it and do what? Put bees on it.
All right. Question.
Yep.
Can you only have bees, or can you have multiple?
You can only get one
Use.
exemption, okay? If it's 10 acres and up, there are a host of exemptions that you can get. If it's between 5 and 10, there's only one, Bs.
So you can only do Bs.
5 acres to 20 acres, okay? That's the limit for Bs, okay?
5 to 20.
5 to 20. If you have a minimum of 5 up to a maximum of 20, you can get an exemption with Bs. The other exemptions only start with a minimum of 10 acres. And what you get as far as the maximum, sky's the limit. There is no maximum. Okay, so you could have 60,000 acres and have it under timber exemption, okay? And it's still agriculturally exempt, yes.
The thing to keep in mind is whenever you're talking to your client and you tell them 10 acres and up, you can get the ag exemption. But what if they put their house on it? On that 10 acres?
Depends. If they're doing something other than bees. No, it doesn't.
But if
Because
they,
the county will assess an acre for the residential use, which drops the available property down to 9. They're good.
then you've got it.
They're good. Now, if you buy 5 acres and you put a house on it,
Up a creek.
you're up a creek. So always buy 6. If you have 6 acres, because the county will assess 1 acre for residents, right, for residential use, okay? There are lots of ins and outs. This is not, I'm trying to tell you folks, this is what I'm talking about with chess. Yes, sir. Absolutely. You negotiate that. You negotiate that. Absolutely. Now, let me explain something though. Those are considered non-realty items. Okay. So what you would do is you would have a bill of sale if it's livestock. That's a separate transaction. It can be done concurrently with your closing, but you're going to have a bill of sale for the livestock. Okay. And there is no commission on that. All right. But yes, you can convey, they are non-realty items and you can convey those upon closing. Absolutely. And a smart realtor will try and do that.
Okay,
Yes.
6 acres. When do I have to have Bs on it? Before I buy it?
Find out from your county tax assessor collector. Okay. It depends. It varies by county. Okay. Generally speaking, if you're buying 6 acres, okay, chances are that 6 acres, somebody has been smart enough. Trust me, these folks out in the country, they are not stupid. Do not ever think that they are hayseeds. They are not. They are all over this stuff. Chances are they've got some sort of an exemption in place. Okay. They've got a larger tract that they're carving up into smaller pieces. Okay. Or if it's a 6 acre tract, chances are they've got bees on it. Even if they're empty hives,
Right.
they've got bees.
It is, what's the number of hives? Is there
Varies by county.
is there an algorithm there?
It varies by county. You have to check with the county tax
Okay.
assessor collector for that agricultural exemption. Yeah. Our property that we have 10.5 acres in Washington County. We have to have a minimum of 8 hives. 8 hives. 5.
Sometimes that's not easy to do.
Yeah, well, you have the hives out there, and if you wind up, losing your bees, you just still have to have your hives out there. Okay. Generally speaking, you're not going to get a tax assessor that's going to come out and open your hives to look at your bees, because that could have disastrous effects. Every now and then you'll have someone who's a bee person. Brazoria County actually has a guy that goes out
Claire,
and he'll look. Yes.
I
Who's-
have someone has 200 acres up in Bandera.
Yep.
He gets an ag exemption by allowing his neighbor to run cattle through
Yes.
his area. So that's legit.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
They have an agreement.
Okay.
They have an agreement. Absolutely.
In fact, if you have an opportunity and you have somebody who's buying extra acreage and it's already got, say, they're doing hay on it, you want to run up front ahead of that and see if that person who's doing hay on behalf of your client is willing to continue doing so
If they're
for
interested.
if your client is interested. Because a lot of them don't necessarily want to change anything, but they don't want to go out and buy a bunch of cattle to put on it. And sometimes it's good for both.
A year.
That's-
They have for each year. For each 12-month period. For each 12-month period.
Yeah, they got to
Full
keep it
year.
on there.
Full year. Okay. So they're a little smarter. Yeah. It's a full year for each full year. It's not a partial. It's a full year that they keep it on. So if they bought it now, they'd have to keep it on for the entire 12 months of 2023 to get any kind of deferral.
And it is
Okay.
significant. The money
Can
is
be.
significant.
Yeah.
You know, I think on the 90 acres, he's probably paying $5,000 or $6,000 a year.
Yeah,
Now.
at least. So I'm gonna step it up just a little bit, because we're fixing to run out of time. Agricultural tax exemption, if it's land, make sure you have proof of that, okay? Make sure it's still in effect. Regardless of what you're doing, what type of classification you're doing as far as a listing agreement, if there is a partnership, a dissolution of a partnership, a divorce, an estate, make sure whether or not a power of attorney is in place. You have different types of power of attorney. Standard is a statutory, durable power of attorney. Okay, that means it's 100%. They're acting on behalf of someone. They can do anything they want to. Whoever holds that DPOA can do anything they want to. They can sign anything. They might as well be that person. If you have a limited power of attorney, that's going to be specific to a certain use. Medical power of attorney. Okay, real estate power of attorney. Things like that. It's specific to a particular use. But make sure you have a copy. If you're dealing with an estate, make sure of who the executor for the estate is and make sure they have a court order, a copy. They give you a copy of the court order, naming them or affirming that they are the executor or executrix, even if it's not past probate. If it's still in the courts, that's a whole nother can of worms. But you're going to have it. That's when you're going to have the DPOA. Somebody's acting on behalf of, and you're going to have a DPOA, and you want a copy of that. As things move through the probate courts, that's when your title company, if you're smart, you're going to open title immediately. Let the title company get involved. And if you've got a good closer with a good underwriter, they're going to stay on top of it. It's all going to be good. FIRPTA. How many of y'all? Okay, FIRPTA. How many of y'all know what FIRPTA is? Yes. Foreign Investment in Real Estate in Real Property Tax Act of 1980, FIRPTA. If your seller is a foreign national, okay, make sure they are aware of FIRPTA. When they sell the property, they have to disclose they're a foreign national and 15% will be held back. Okay. The title company will hold 15% to make sure that the taxes are paid. They don't want them skipping the country and not paying taxes on the sale. The 1506, the general information and notice 1506 has a little paragraph on FIRPTA in it, but it's just a little paragraph. Flood map. Every piece of property you list down here, do a flood map check. I don't care if you think it's above. It may be above the floodplain, above the 500 year, but you know what? Right across the street, it could be in the 500 year. Or it could be X 500. How many of y'all know what X 500 is? But what does it mean? No. No, but that was good. Sounded good. No, X 500 means that that property is levy protected. Levy protected, X 500. If you see that, levy protected. The two biggest areas down here that we deal with are going to be Richmond, Rosenberg. They are levy protected. You've got the Brazos River that goes down there and they flood like a son of a gun. You have bad storms, they're going to flood. Simonton's on the wrong side of the levee. So property, what they did in those two towns is they built levees. And you can see them if you look at an aerial. You can see the levees. They're berms. There are areas that don't flood. They are given the same percentage, the same chance of flooding, that X classification, which is above any floodplain, regular floodplain, because they are levee protected. They've got big berms. Simonton does. I don't know about Fulsher. Anywhere along the Brazos River or any major tributary, you want to look, okay? Because unless it's levee protected, unless the land is levee protected, chances are it's going to flood, okay? It's going to be 500. You're going to have 500 year away from it. You're going to have 100 year. And then right down where the creek or the river or whatever it is, you're going to have floodway, okay? Floodway. So you have floodway, 100, 500, X 500, okay? X 500 is levee protected, okay?
And it changes the value tremendously.
Absolutely. It changes what you have to do to develop it. Make sure you have a flood map. Do a flood map search. I don't care where it is, do a flood map search. If it's got flood property, if there's anything in the 500 year, X 500 or 100 within 4 or 5 blocks, I want you to do a special flood hazard notice. Okay? Why do we do that? Not only to notify our clients, but to protect you. Okay? Do it. It's an extra piece of work, but you know what? It beats getting sued and losing your license. That way, if they ever come back and they go, oh, you didn't tell me, you go through your documents and you go, you remember signing this? That's exactly why I want y'all to do the things that I have on this form. That notice is in residential. That notice is not in commercial compliance on command. I want you protected. Okay, so let's zoom on down. We're actually on page 2. Woohoo! Okay, personal legal issues which can affect the sale. We want to make sure we have copies of any legal documents that deal with that. If the property was owned by a couple, then they went through a divorce. You want a copy of the divorce decree, the part of the decree that deals with the property. Who gets it? What's the dissolution agreement? Okay, you want that. Income producing properties. You're going to want a copy of any current leases for ag land. This will include any hay leasing, any agricultural use leases. Okay, even if they're word of mouth, you want to get an affidavit from the person who has the agreement. Real easy. Draw something up, have it simple, have them sign it, okay? With a witness. Financials on income producing property. You want financials showing income, operating expenses, also known as OPEX, capital expenditures, CapEx, and any ancillary income from sources other than leases, if applicable. In a multifamily, this would be washaterias, vending machines, okay? Ancillary income. This information will help you also determine a cap rate, okay? We'll go over cap rates in another time. Property information research, when you're looking at your property before or after the listing, regardless, you're going to check and see if there's a property owners association, a MUD, a PID, which is a development area. You can also have management districts, which kind of fall under the same thing. So you'll use the PID form if they're in a management district. And there are 5 or 6 of those around Houston. So you'll have to look. Where's the easiest way to find out if your property is within those? Takes maybe 30 seconds to get there and find it. It'll give you all of them. It'll give you all of them. Where do you find it? Huh? Say it louder. The realist property detail report. And where do you find realist? Thank you. You go to HAR, you go to tax, you go to realist. About 4/5 of the way down, you're going to see taxing jurisdictions. Depending on how much information is there, it may be a little further up. That's going to show you, if you're in a management district, anybody that taxes that property, it's going to show it. The only thing it doesn't show in a subdivision is an HOA. Those they don't show. Absolutely. If it's affected, oh yeah. If it's a taxing authority. Opportunity zones, you want to find out if your property that you're selling, building, whatever is in an opportunity zone. These may be going away, but they're still here now. That can be beneficial to your buyers, okay? If the property is in an opportunity zone, okay? So they're beneficial to your sellers if you know that the property is in one. It varies by date. Now, last year, they made it retroactive so that the previous 2 years zones, it's based on demographics, okay, earning income for the demographics in the area. They made a ruling where opportunity zones, they generally change year to year. They went ahead and just made it retroactive that the past 2 years were included in this year, okay? But you need to check. You still need to check. MapRight will show you where opportunity zones are. Difficult to develop areas. That's another tax zone where they get benefits. Opportunity zones, you get tax benefits. Difficult to develop areas, DDAs, same thing. And if you're really fortunate, they'll overlap and you'll have both. And that can happen. So here we're going on, you're still looking at property information research, your flood zone map. Again, you want zoning information, deed restrictions, and development restrictions. Where are you going to find development restrictions? Two places. Development agreement with, if you're within the city limits, with the municipality, if there's a development agreement in place. Deed restrictions. Commercial outlots in a subdivision, in a residential subdivision, are generally called commercial reserves. Okay. Yes. Houston has deed restrictions. They don't have zoning. Thank you so much for that question. He's setting me up. Yes. Agreement. Yep. An agreement with a developer for certain things. They get tax incentives. Yep. Yep. Okay, that's not part of a development. That's probably not a development agreement. That's a zoning or an ordinance restriction. An ordinance restriction, okay? Zoning and ordinances are generally two different things, okay? So you can have a commercial tract, all right? You can have a commercial tract. It's clearly zoned for commercial use, but they can't sell alcohol. Okay, a development agreement, you can check with the property owner, the developer of the property, and see if there's one in place, or the city that the property is in. Okay. Yeah, you can also find a lot of that stuff online, but the easiest way, pick up the phone, call city engineering department. Okay. They'll tell you. They love to talk to the public. They love to talk to realtors. They love the fact that you have thought to pick up the phone and call them. It's like, oh, this is cool. Somebody's smart enough to ask the right person. Okay. And they're generally really nice, and they will give you a plethora of information. City engineering department. Okay, environmental reports, phase 1, phase 2, topographical reports, soil analysis. Soil analysis, a general soil analysis you can get on MapRight. Okay, If you have clay, if you have sandy, what's called sandy loam, means the dirt has a high amount of sand in it. Sandy loam is not as stable. Okay. So this is going to affect your development. All right. If you're buying land for agricultural use, you don't want a lot of clay. It's not great for growing crops in clay. Now it's great for holding water in a tank or a pond, but you want to just map right. Go onto it and it's going to tell you what your soil analysis is. You can also do a quick topo in MapRight, and it's going to give you the height. You know, nothing here is totally level. Y'all know what a topographical display or a topographical survey is. It gives you the heights and depths, and that's how you also determine floodplains. A surveyor is going to come out. They will do a topo, especially if you're in the city of Houston. You have to have a surveyor come out and do a topo of the property to determine where your base elevation is, because the first floor, exclusive of parking garages and things like that, the first floor, usable floor of a building or a dwelling has to be 18 inches above the determined base elevation. It used to be just base elevation. You'd go by FEMA. They changed that in 2019. City of Houston did. Harris County followed suit. Determined base elevation, which means you must have a surveyor come out and give you an elevation certificate.
Don't all surveys have
No.
the topo?
No. You must request a topographical survey. It's totally different. On
That
the
means it's
document,
extra money.
on the document that y'all have that has all the commercial leases, okay? All the commercial links, rather, not leases. It's got that information in there. One of the links that it takes you to is the blog that I have for commercial real estate, for topics in commercial real estate. It has information on cemeteries, on topos, on surveys, the different types of surveys, so that you can speak intelligently upon those topics, okay? I'm trying to add one every month or two, okay, to that. But that's going to be your easiest place to find some of that information. If you're dealing with property that has a well on it or a septic, you want information with regard to the well. There's a form in Zip Forms with regard to well and septic. You want to find out if there's been any kind of a maintenance program on it, if it's aerobic, which means that it has a sprinkler system to deal with sanitized overflow out of your drain field. Those have to be maintained on a regular basis. You want that maintenance agreement. You want to know what the maintenance schedule is, okay? If you're within the city of Houston or within Harris County, you can have a water well. They don't care if you have a water well, but they're going to meter it because you're in a subsidence zone. You're in a subsidence district, and we have groundwater conservation, okay? So you've got to know water wells and septics, get the information on that. If you're going to do a competitive market analysis on the property, you're going to look at sales, historical sales, sold and closed, listings, current listings, they haven't sold yet, leases, things that are currently leased, okay? For lease, they're currently available for lease. Current development in the area that might affect your property. If you know that there's a multifamily that's going to, not a multifamily, if there's a mixed use development that's going to go in, like I just sent a thing out, I think for League City, they've got a 44 acre mixed use development going in less than a mile from a piece of property one of our agents has listed. Guess what? That is a nice shot in the arm, and it's something he can put on his marketing because it impacts your product. You want to look and see what's going on. Please read Houston Business Journal. Please read Community Impact. Okay. I think it's actually called Impact on Community. Please read those. Also, Texas Recon, that's from the Texas Real Estate Center. You'll be ahead of the game if you do so. Impending development, we did that. Property taxes, tax records and plats, okay? You want to look at those. Where do we find tax information? Realist. You can also get it from HCAD, okay? Or whoever the county appraisal district is for the county in question. You want to do a tax analysis? Yes. Yeah, that too. Availability of utilities. If it's land, well, if you're within the city of Houston, water and sewer, you can find on their GIS system, okay? Argus GIS, okay? It's actually Argus, and the GIS is part of that. It's a mapping system that the federal government has. And it will tell you all kinds of stuff. It's in the links for that is also in that document that's in the shared directory. Absolutely. It will, the city of Houston, Argus for sanitary and water and storm sewers will show you where the lines are. There are actually lines, there are areas close to the interior part of the city of Houston that don't have water lines. They don't have sewer lines. So they're on well and septic. Okay. They'll absolutely. And it'll, even if you click on the lines, they're different colors. It will tell you what the dimension is. So it will help you determine capacity. Okay. One of the things that people want to know is the capacity, the user capacity of the utilities. And if you know whether it's a 24-inch pipe or a 12-inch pipe, the capacity is different for each of those. And it makes a difference with regard to use of the land. Okay. City of Houston, or look up whatever your municipality is. Chances are they have an Argus map available. And you can go to the city's website and they will have a link for maps. Okay. Take you right to it. A tax analysis, what entities are being paid? Realist. If they're being taxed, the only ones that aren't going to show is an owners association, whether it's an HOA or a POA. Those are the only things that aren't going to show in your taxing. Go to Realist. It is your friend. You pay for it, use it. Delinquent tax notices. Okay. You can check those out. That's going to be the tax office here in Houston. Harris County Appraisal District, I think, has a link to that as well. Also, last thing, have a list of service providers handy. I can't tell you how many times people need an attorney. They need an appraiser. They need an inspector. They need an engineer. Okay. Have a list of those providers handy. If Brandon can get the last of our stuff done, we will have an area on our website that will show a list of people that we are familiar with. We don't guarantee them, but we're familiar with them. Okay. So not a list of providers. No. I have some that I use and I generally send those out when people ask, can you give me a list? We just had a residential agent that desperately needed a really good litigation attorney, a commercial. I sent it to her, gave her 3 names and told her this guy's a pit bull. That is a great way to market. Especially with residential agents. If you can give them all of these providers, you will be their best friend. And please do real estate attorneys. Okay. Don't send them a regular attorney. You want a real estate attorney. And if it's commercial, you want someone who is a commercial real estate attorney. MAI appraisers, Member Appraisal Institute. It's like the difference between being a licensed real estate agent and a realtor. They're held to a higher standard. They have more testing, more education required. You're going to get a better appraisal. Okay. And they are not questioned. By and large, an MAI appraisal is not questioned. They may cost a little bit more, not always, but they are not ever questioned. Title companies. You want a selection of good title companies. Member Appraisal Institute. That's what MAI stands for. Insurance agent. You want a good insurance agent or 2 or 3 that you can refer. I would never limit yourself to one. Civil and mechanical engineers for inspections, renovations, potential renovations. Okay, if you're looking at, especially if you're looking at old property, something that's been built and been there for 2 or 3 years, 20 years, 30, you want to have an engineer come in and take a look at it. 1031 agents. We're going to have a 1031 agent here for the large group meeting this month. 1031 agents. That's a tax deferral program. Okay. You want to have 2 or 3 good ones that you can refer. Commercial property inspectors. We tend to use Titan, I think, is one of the biggest ones here right now. That's strangely enough, huh? Well, they're residential. They don't do commercial. They'll do multifamily. So a good inspector is the bane of a seller, the bane of their existence, because they will tear it apart and tell you everything that is wrong. But they are a buyer's best friend because they go into it with their eyes wide open. If you are smart, whether you're selling a home or whether you're selling a piece of property, go ahead, suck it up, get an inspection done before you list. Before you list. And if you really want to be cagey, you'll get an inspection done 6 months before you list. Say what? I'm sorry? What about leasing? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, I mean, if you want to have an inspector come in like Titan come in to look at his space and make sure there's no mildew, which would reveal bad pipes. We had a landlord that managed to get that past a tenant, not one of ours, one of the other tenants, one of the other agents. And there was mildew in the walls. Yeah. So an inspection, even of a lease space, especially if it's an older space, or we've had recent floods. Yeah, always a good idea to have an inspection done. So, okay, we have actually run over a couple of minutes and I apologize for that. You have the documents. Please read through them. If you have questions, call me, text me, email me. Lord knows you know where I stay and you know how to get a hold of me. Yes. Okay, what about the easements? It will show easements. It'll also show pipelines. If you're looking at one of the things that you're going to look at on surveys, if you have utility easements a good survey is going to show, an Alta survey will show all of those things. It will show pipelines. It will show utility easements, water, sewer, you name it. It's going to be on there. CenterPoint, aerial easements. Easements aren't just on the land, okay? They're in the air as well. If you have overhead power lines, CenterPoint has an aerial easement. And it's generally, I want to say it's about 10 feet, in some cases up to 30, okay? And you can't build within that easement. You can't put anything solid that would impede the easement anyway. If you have a pipeline easement, you cannot put anything solid like concrete over a pipeline or in the pipeline easement. If you have pipelines underneath the ground, water lines, sewer lines, you can't put anything solid like concrete that would be considered a permanent fixture. You can have impervious, but it can't be a permanent fixture, which means if you're going to put something, if you need to stabilize land for parking, you would use gravel, shell, asphalt. You can't use concrete. Yes.
And they used to have a. Still can I build septic system still there?
You can build on top of it, but you better make sure that there aren't any issues with the drain field, with the drain field. Is the tank still in place? Dig the tank up. Take the lid off, fill it in. Then you can build on it.
And usually they're pretty shallow as far as where the lids are.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not.
How long
some-
has it been, how long has it been since it was used? If it's been more than a year or so, chances are you can take the lid off of it, fill it in, and you're fine.
And if there are any issues with the property, you want your client to know. You don't want them buying something that, you know, you're saying, well, you should have known, or they're asking
Sewer,
you,
septic,
because you want to keep them as your client. In commercial, you can have a lot of repeat deals. They're coming back. If you do one screw up like that, it's better not to have something close and to keep the client. It's like, I get text messages asking about sites. First thing I do is I check the floodplain.
Yeah.
And I'll send it back to them and tell them, you don't want that. That's in the floodway, or, you know,
Yeah.
I will make sure that they're aware before they even think any further about
Yeah.
it.
with regard to septic. Okay, with regard to septic, understand septic is a toxic waste. Okay, it's a toxic waste. And so you have to treat it accordingly. If it hasn't been used and it's been pumped, chances are you can fill it and you're okay. But you'll have to check the ordinances for the municipality that it falls within, or or county. Yeah, difference between a tank and a drain field.
Which means that San Francisco is a toxic waste area.
Yeah, so we'll go over that stuff at another time. It's 6 minutes after 5, and I'd imagine some of you folks want to go home, go someplace, have a glass of wine.
Thank you all very much for
If you have
attending.
questions, get a hold of me. Yeah.
Change the price of the mileage? How does that